At some point, I'm going to need to do a ranking of Flatout Games games because they exist in such a comfortable sphere within the board game world. One that honestly works so well with where I'm at personally in life. And Knitting Circle is no different. It fits into that visual style and that comfortable sphere that I've come to know and love from Flatout Games. Knitting Circle is a game designed by Emily Vincent and the Flatout Games collab. It's published by Flatout Games with art by Beth Sobel. It plays 1 to 4 players in about 30 to 40 minutes. In Knitting Circle, players play as either cats chasing yarn or crafters knitting garments, and it could be both. You know, we're going with both. In Knitting Circle, you are both a cat chasing yarn and a crafter knitting garments. The game plays for 6 rounds, and the player at the end of those rounds with the most points wins. And that's just another thing about Flatout Games that I really appreciate so much is their consistency in their game designs. They found a system that works, and they stuck with it. If you are the player with the most points at the end of the game, you win, and I really appreciate that consistency. Okay, real quick, if I could just for a second, I've run into this in the past where people don't always catch my sarcasm, and I often tend to lean towards drier, sarcastic humor. And the reason being is because there are oftentimes instances where I don't know what I'm talking about. And if I can tend to deflect to that sarcastic nature, sometimes I try to cover up my flaws with that. But please know that I understand that most games, you are trying to get more points than anybody else. So that was just, anyway. A round consists of 2 phases. In the first phase, players alternate moving their cat tokens a space or 2 and grab a yarn token from that space, placing it in the same orientation at the top of their personal board. Once each player has 4 pieces of yarn, the second phase of the turn commences. This part is all done simultaneously. Players can take as many actions as they'd like as long as they are legally able to do so. This could be placing yarn onto an existing project, starting a new project, finishing a project, using a grabby paw token to get any yarn you need, or flipping tiles from one side to the other. Now, some of these actions have a cost associated with them. Oftentimes that cost is just taking a yarn from your board and placing it back into the supply. Completed garments will acquire buttons that boost the point value. These buttons reward you for specific patterns, colors, and garment types. Now, you don't have to use a pattern button to complete a garment without penalty because you may not always have one that matches your specific garment. However, if your garment is butt ugly and it doesn't fit in the category of any of the ones listed in the rulebook itself, you're going to take a 3-point penalty for that garment. Now, there are far more robust rules explanations for this game out there, and I highly recommend you take a look at them if that's something you're interested in, or even just find a PDF of the rulebook because it is not a complex game. Another hallmark of Flatout Games. They make clear, consistent rulebooks. Now let's get to the nitty-gritty and unravel this game and talk about what I disliked about it. Primarily, it was that it took me about 7 minutes to set up the first time. It got faster in subsequent plays, so, which ultimately, I mean, I guess that's not that big of a deal. Like, I was tired, and honestly, I didn't want to learn a new game. Okay, and admittedly, this is sort of a knee-jerk reaction to when you're tired and you see a game that has 3 separate piles of buttons, a bag full of yarn, a deck of cards, 2 other token piles, and 6 of these garment types, cat tokens, variable player setup, and individual player boards. It seems like a lot. However, once I was up and running, a cinch. Oftentimes I have to refer back to rulebooks when I replay any game, and that could be a game that I've played many, many times. Knitting Circle, after I played it the first time and set it up, I did not need to reference the rulebook. Everything makes sense with where it went. Everything was clear, concise, and really not that difficult to get up and running. So admittedly, it is a light to midweight game. Not that big a deal to set up in its entirety, but it was still more than what I was expecting. And then it wasn't that big a deal after that. The reason I even emphasize this is because the actual gameplay itself is extremely relaxing. Flatout Games does a fantastic job of making table slapper games, so games that you can slap on the table, get up and running, and play. Now that we've gotten the negatives out of the way, I'd like to talk about the positives, because everything else I loved. Now, first off, the box itself is an absolute eye-pleaser. Beth Sobel, I've said many good things in the past, and I'll continue to say good things about her in the future, as well as her work with Knitting Circle. I like cats, I like cozy themes. This is that. In the same way that I loved Calico and the way it looked, I love the way Knitting Circle looks on the table, and that's nice. Now, it is not just the cozy art and all that, it is the iconography. Calico did a fantastic job of having clean-cut iconography that made things completely understandable. This game continues that in that Knitting Circle is a Calico game. It is the same series of games. It's a different game, but it uses the same icons, and that is to the benefit of anyone that has played Calico in the past, because when you're looking at the colors and they've got the same icons as that game, it's much, much easier to slip right into this one. And if you've not played Calico in the past, and this is your first introduction into the series, guess what? It's going to introduce you into a very clean, understandable system, so that when you go and do play Calico later on, you'll be able to slip into that game easier. And I really appreciate that and enjoy that about Knitting Circle. The puzzles in this game give players some breathing room. You're only ever able to work on 2 garments at a time, but the myriad of options available to you in the second half of a round helps you maneuver your way around obstacles. So like any good crafting project, you will hit snags and you'll adapt. That restriction of only ever being able to work on 2 garments at a time is great. And that's because there's no penalty for not completing a garment. So by limiting yourself to only being able to work on 2 garments, it does away with that negative aspect of acquiring negative points in something like, in a game like Ticket to Ride, where if you take on a route that you can't complete, you get negative points equal to that route's point value. That doesn't happen here. So that negative feeling of, oh, I'm taking negative points, unless, again, your garment is completely disgusting looking, you're not going to take negative points for not completing it. And that plethora of options in that second half of a round will often dictate your actions in the first half, where all you have to do is move your cat and take a yarn. There's a dichotomy between the simplicity of the first half and the complexity of the second. As you choose from your limited options, you're planning the course for your entire round. Knitting Circle stands tall in my mind in the offering of this weight of game in Flatout's entire catalog. And granted, I could be completely enamored with the shiny and new, who among us is not, right? But I think it's something more than that. Knitting Circle offers that cozy aesthetic, really clean-cut iconography, fun puzzles, and a brain-warming puzzle as well. I love Calico. It hurts my head to play it. Knitting Circle offers something that is comfortably uncomfortable. So deciding how difficult of a project you want to work on and the timing of when you want to work on it, that's up to you. You could make mittens the entire game and really finish quite a few of them if you want, but making long johns is going to earn you more points, but potentially might not get finished by the end of the game. So there are pathways to victory that could be very comfortable, or you could take risks that might be dangerous, but might work out for you in the end. You can mitigate some of that tension as well, because as you complete garments, you're going to start earning rewards, and those rewards could be extra yarn at any given time. It could be grabby paw tokens, which let you take specific pieces of yarn. You can also fulfill custom orders if you're playing the advanced option of the game, which I highly, highly recommend. It really does not add that much difficulty to it, but it gives you more things to work towards. It gives you more direction, which I think in some ways makes the game a little bit easier if you're overwhelmed by the amount of options available. You can take a look at these custom orders and say, okay, this is a specific goal I'm working towards. And those goals everyone can earn as well. It's not like the first person that gets it is the only one that gets those points. However, if you are the first person to complete one of these custom orders, you get a grabby paw token. So it's a little bit more tension, but it directs you on which way to go. So I would say start the game with the custom orders, even though it's listed as the advanced method in the rulebook. Emily Vincent and the Flatout collab has done something really special once again. To me, they're this small publisher with a Midas touch, and Knitting Circle at this point sits right among the top 3 of my favorites of their games, along with Calico and Verdant as my top 3. Knitting Circle is one that I am keeping up on the table because I like to play it. Because my wife likes to play it. It's something that we can sit down together in the evening and play a game over a cup of tea, and it is relaxing, it's not overwhelming, and it is not as brain-burny as Calico itself. Now, all of the offerings are fantastic from Flatout Games, but Knitting Circle right now for me is sitting somewhere very, very special. So if the idea of those spatial and tactile puzzles doesn't interest you, if the art doesn't interest you, if the theme doesn't interest you, maybe it's not for you. However, there is a lot going on for this game, and if any element of those piques your interest, take a look at it. Take a closer look at it. There's lots of content out there. I'm not the only one that's reviewed this game, obviously. Good chance that if you're watching my review of this now, you've probably already seen other reviews of this game. So let me just throw my hat in the ring and say, Knitting Circle is fantastic, and you should take a look at it. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, follow me on Blue Sky, as well as any other form of social media pretty much. I'm on TikTok as well, at Plumpy Thimble on all of those. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.